Welcome to the Sports Entrepreneur Show powered by the Ninja Zone, the only podcast for sports entrepreneurs that gives you an inside look into what it takes to turn your passion for sports into a business. Hey everyone, welcome to the Sports Entrepreneur Show. This week's episode is exciting for me to release. It is with Gary Brackett. Gary Brackett was the defensive captain for the Indianapolis Colts, and he is now an entrepreneur, actually a restaurateur. But today's conversation is great. There's so many takeaways, and I can tell you that he was the first guest to make me cry a little. So enjoy this one, guys. I am your host, Casey Wright. Thank you guys for joining me this week as I sit down with Gary Brackett, which I'm having a little bit of a fangirl experience, being a born and raised in Indy, a Colts fan my whole life. So forgive me if I sound a little, starstruck. But for those of you that aren't familiar with Gary, he is the former defensive captain of the Indianapolis Colts, the founder of the Impact Foundation and the Brackett Restaurant Group. And in this episode of The Sports Entrepreneur, we're going to learn how he used his background in professional football to launch his entrepreneurial career, which is truly the essence of this podcast. So I'm super excited to have you, Gary. Thank you for coming on.
No question. Thanks for having me on as well.
Interestingly enough, I was listening to a podcast this morning while I was drying my hair with my earbuds in. That's what I do. No net time, right? And tonight I have this event for the Started Up Foundation. It's a really cool company doing entrepreneurship and innovation in schools, and noticed that you were on their podcast. So I started listening, and I'm going to start right in with something that you said that I wrote down right away, gave me goosebumps. And it was, you said, I reserve the right to change my opinion if I find out more information. And I wanted to start off with that because I've been trying to figure out a way to say that, and you gave it to me. So just talk a little bit. I mean, we'll go back into history and all of that, but I just love that quote so much. Talk to me a little bit about that and why you say that.
First of all, thanks for having me on. I've definitely been following you from afar as well, so definitely kudos to you and what you've done. But in terms of reserving the right to change my mind, I think, as an entrepreneur, you're constantly learning and growing and understanding new nuances that may be beneficial to your business. And I think we all have this moment where we get locked in and we feel a certain way about, a certain set of either marketing tactics or invested, whatever it is. But I think sometimes we get pigeonholed and almost stubborn by not wanting to change that belief. But for me, as I continue to uncover new information, more powerful information that may alter the way that I believe about something, I feel like I can, be an adult and say, hey, I was wrong. The way I was thinking about the situation was incorrect. This is the new way that I approach it. And I think, it's one big trial and error, but I think having the confidence to know that I don't know everything and be willing to continue to learn and grow, I think that's one of the huge parts of being a successful entrepreneur.
For sure. I've always loved the quote by Maya Angelou that you do what you know is best until you know better, and then you do better. And with my staff and my employees, that's one area where I feel like it's not even about, for a lot of them, it's not even about wanting to admit that they're wrong. It's more that they're like beating themselves up because they said that they would do something and they want to just keep doing it because they want to be trusted in a way. I know I've felt that. Like I said we were going to do this because I was sure. And if I change my course, they may not trust me. And if you can lay the foundation that, hey, I might find out new information and we may pivot, people. It's just a great tool and a great strategy. So I just had to jump in right with that because I was just excited and I wanted to make sure we got to it. So I do want you to share your story. I didn't know the backstory from your college days, and it was really inspiring. So can you tell everybody about that?
I was a pretty good high school athlete, but I always was deemed undersized, probably around 5'10", 215 pounds, coming out of high school as a linebacker, where linebackers are traditionally, 6'3", 6'4", 240. So definitely consider undersized for my position. And I had to walk on at Rutgers University. Well, when I walked on, I got in through a special program called EOF, Equal Opportunity Fund. So the way that they presented it to me, I thought I was going to college for free. But after they ran my parents' FAFSA information, unfortunately, they found it was like the happy medium. My dad just got a job. Three of my siblings just left the house, so they no longer claimed on the taxes. So if it came to it that we had to pay full tuition. So my parents refinanced the house in order to pay for my first year of education. So their only thing was like, hey, this isn't, you need to perform. So I had A's and B's my first semester. So it's like, your academics are first, football, if you make the team, great. At the time, I still hadn't even walked on to the football team. So my second season, when I walked on, they refinanced the house again. Same thing, had pretty solid grades. But then that third season, my parents, they could not afford our college tuition anymore. And they called me about, halfway through minicamp telling me that the college tuition came in. And I'm like, okay, we'll pay it. That's what parents do, right? They take care of your issues as a child. And they were like, hey, the thing is, we don't have any more equity in our house. And we're not going to be able to pay this. So you're going to have to change courses and potentially come back home. So I was pretty bummed out. I told my position coach, who told the head coach, and I had at the time, this is about 2000, year 2000. I had about a 1989 Hyundai Excel hatchback, and it was filled with all the possessions that I owned. And I I went to the head coach at the time. It was Terry Shea, and his first words were like, "Hey, I heard that you can't afford tuition and that you're leaving school." I was like, yeah, I just want to thank you for the opportunity. I went to shake his hand. And then he went into this, hey, we're going to constantly recruit players that are better than Gary Brackett, that are bigger than Gary Brackett. And I'm like, look, man, you don't got to kick me when I'm down. Like, I'm actually leaving. Like, it was fun. But then he's like, sit down, I'm not done. And he was like, but you know what? I always admired about you. Like, you work extremely hard. You're always first in line. I never have to worry about you in academics. And that if we can have a 90 Gary Brackett on this team, we'll be much better. So because of that, I'm going to give you a scholarship. And that moment really changed my life, right? Because I went from, leaving a Division I university and who knows what else I was going to be able to do. But what's interesting, and this is the next moment that changed my life, I went into the weight room and I was excited about getting a scholarship, and I'm jumping up and down because I've already, dapped everyone up and told them that I'm leaving and that I'll be back up, in a month or two. So them seeing me again, like, hey, what's going on? I was like, hey, I got a scholarship. So we're all excited. So at the time, this gentleman came up to me, Wesley Robinson. He was a starting defensive end. He was about 6'3", 245 pounds. And he says, what's all the commotion? I told him I got a scholarship, man. He was like, and he looked me dead in my face and he said, a scholarship? You should worry about starting. And it's funny, until that moment, I never even thought about starting. The only thing I thought in my little brain was that I wanted a scholarship to pay for my school so I could get a job. But the fact that he said you should be worried about starting, and he was one of the top 5 players on the team, and I was thinking like, wow, he thinks of me as a starter? Like, what's wrong with me that I don't think of myself as a starter? Right. And to your point earlier that we made, like, it's okay to change your mind. So at that moment, I changed my mind that I am good enough to be a starter. Why not me? So everything I did, I dedicated myself to being a starter. Ended up being a 2-time captain, 2-time MVP of Rutgers. And then I ended up getting a free agent deal with the Colts, NFL. Same thing. Had to work my way to the team. But at that point, unfortunately, I had quite a bit of tragedy that hit. During that time, my first season, I lost my father due to heart complications. That off season, I lost my mother for routine surgery. And at the same time, my brother was battling cancer. So I had to give him a bone marrow transplant in order to extend his life, which it did. But unfortunately, he passed that next year. So in an 18-month time span, I had lost my father, my mother, and my closest brother. So really a lot of soul searching. But, as a Christian, my belief is that, the Lord won't put anything on you that we can't bear. So at that moment, instead of, feeling sorry for myself and playing the victim, I kind of just used it as fuel and said, you know what, man, I was blessed because I had these people in my life for that long. And now, they got the best seat in the house looking at me. And I have to prove to them that all their sacrifices was worthwhile.
Oh my gosh. So you were the first guest to make me cry. Wow, I had no idea. I had, as you were talking, I was jotting down just like big things, and there was like 7 of them. And I can't even get back. An amazing story. I think one of the first things you said just about being at school, and that the coach or the friend that talked about starting and how you just had to see bigger. And that's something that people don't realize, that you have to see it to be it. And more often than not, if we don't know it exists, we don't know that we can have it, or it just takes that one person to believe in us. And I had one of those moments with a friend that it was just a neighbor, and I didn't graduate from college. I, ran my parents, mom and pop, and then I moved downtown. Anyway, I met my neighbor who happened to be a surgeon, and she said, "Man, you're an overachiever." And it was just, all it took was that one sentence from somebody that was a surgeon to make me feel like, oh, well, you think I'm good at stuff. Like I can do more. And, what he said to you was great. And the other thing that it just made me think about my dad, I just lost my dad a couple of months ago, young, to heart failure. And we had a rule in our gymnastics gyms, because he was a gymnastics coach, just as I was. And we had a line cutting rule, right? So you put all the kids in line, but in our gym, you could cut, like it was allowed and praised to cut and be the first one in line. So I thought that was just great. So part of what this podcast does is I want people that, and especially a lot of young people that are coming out of sports, or coming out of a lifetime of sports, kind of going into the real world. I had a light bulb moment about a year ago that it was just like, why can't we use all of these skills and this effort and these hours and direct that energy, like use that momentum and align it with, entrepreneurship? Or why do they have to completely become a different person, right? When they either, finish sports or whatever. Because I saw with a lot of my athletes, they were just becoming amazing people. Like, and it was the leadership, the life skills, the teamwork, the discipline, and all of that. And you've done that. When did you know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
So it's funny. I grew up my whole life an entrepreneur. So as a kid, I would cut grass. So I would get the lawnmower and walk around the neighborhood and cut grass. When it snowed outside, I would shovel snow. When the leaves changed and fell on the ground, I would go rake leaves. So my entire life, my parents had a very simple rule. Like if you want extra money, then you have to go out and get it. And, like if you want to cut grass, we'll get you a lawnmower, but you have to go out there and cut grass. So as a kid, I just always realized like, hey, man, you can produce on your own. You don't necessarily need someone to give you a handout. And I think that really, stuck with me throughout my whole life. So when I got into the NFL, I always knew that I was going to be an entrepreneur when I left the game of football.
That's cool. My husband always talks about a paper route as like anytime you meet somebody really successful, they usually had a paper route or some other job that was similar. And we kind of have that in our house. So that's great.
So funny story, right? So I had a paper route and during football season, and this is when it was, nice outside. So I wake up, my paper route. So then it started like getting cold and raining. And I was like, hey, I'm about to quit, man. This isn't like what I signed up for. And my dad was like, you cannot quit. Like, you committed to do this paper route. And you have, I think it was 9 months that I said I was going to do it. He was like, you got to do it the whole 9 months. So for 9 months in the snow, in the rain, like he would wake me up and I would bag the papers in plastic bags and I would go drop them off, man. So yeah, I had a paper route as well. So definitely a lot of character building at a young age.
I love it. I love it. The paper route, and the other one we have is spicy food. There's something about people that like spicy food that I don't know if it's the risk taker in them or what, but that's great. Well, tell us a little bit about what was the first entrepreneurial event. I mean, you've got obviously the Stack Pickles, and you are the founder, and you're now franchising those. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
So tell me for someone that is looking to, to buy a business, which is, yeah, I think a lot of times people think entrepreneurship, you don't buy a business if you're an entrepreneur, but we all learn really quickly that you are totally an entrepreneur when you buy a business. And so talk a little bit about what that looks like as a new entrepreneur, buying a business or buying a franchise, and how, just what does that path look like?
The biggest misconception, or what people a lot of struggle with in terms of franchises in general, when they start talking about how much it costs to open, how much are the fees, how much are the royalties, and a lot of people think that they could build a better mousetrap. And for some people, they can. I mean, they have. But when you just look at the sheer statistics on how many people of independent businesses fail versus how many franchise businesses fail, I mean, the numbers are staggering in favor of franchise business. And the reason that's the case is because we've, as franchisors, have failed and learned and grew. And so many things that we develop in our systems is so that we can protect you and systematize what we've learned to give you a turnkey operation. And when people think about the royalty or the license fee, they think how high it is, but they don't think about, one, someone has to do that job. Someone has to maintain the website. Someone has to market. Someone has to look at new opportunities. Someone has to develop new menu items or new ideals. So that 5%, you're paying that to someone. Even if it's yourself and opportunity costs, you're still paying it. So when I talk to people about franchises, what I tell them is like, this is the opportunity for you to go to business for yourself, but not by yourself. And that's important.
Yeah, it's funny so, I'm not being a franchisee after we created the license with Ninja Zone. Holy cow, like if I would have had a tally sheet of all of the mistakes or and applied labor hours to the time and resources that you put in to create I could have bought 10 franchises
Of course.
for everything that I screwed up. I mean, literally. And I look at what's funny is I had never bought a license or a franchise. And now that's what I look for because I know what it takes. I know what it takes to build those frameworks for people. And so now it's like, man, is there a system? Because I know just operating it, just the leadership in general, like that's where I want to spend my time. I could talk for days on that. There's a quote that I love, and it's how you do anything is how you do everything. And I think that's where really getting back to the sports minded people and the leadership and the work ethic that comes with playing sports, and especially playing sports at a very high level. How you do anything is how you do everything. And it sounds like that's definitely been you throughout your life and your career, and now moving into being a super successful entrepreneur. But I was a coach much more than I was an athlete. And the very cool thing that I've seen now as a business owner, I've hired a lot of the kids that I had that like grew up in my gym, and they're the same people. I mean, it's crazy. Like those kids that took extra turns, or the rules followers stayed the rules followers, and the ones that took extra turns, the ones that thought outside the box, like they're the same people. So talk a little bit about that. Do you have just employees or anybody, what have you seen as far as athletes that have come into the business space? What's been the result?
Yeah, it's amazing, and it's a shame that more athletes don't really recognize how valuable they are in terms of their skill set, their mindset, their workload that they can overcome. Like, not everyone can put in 30, 40 hours a week at their specific sport and then hold a job and go to school. So I think it's very strong minded, strong willed, extremely disciplined people. And what I found in my office alone, I have one of my marketer, guy, my digital marketer, BJ, he ran track at the ball. And he still runs like 3 miles every day religiously. And it's amazing how, that time and that breathing and that cadence and that reps. And he knows what it feels like to have pain and have to push past it. And I think so many people who unfortunately didn't play sports, they look at danger and pain and failing as something bad. When you're an athlete, like if I'm going in the weight room and I want to see how much I lift, my last thing that I lift, I should fail at it. And that's because that's when I know, hey, that's my limit. And that's it, that gets me excited because it gives me something to push for and to strive for. And then next week I want to overcome that. I want to be able to lift that next week because I failed at it before. And if you're playing it safe, you'll never achieve your highest amount of productivity or success just because you never really hit your second win.
Yeah. We talk about in Ninja Zone, we say ninjas make mistakes. And I say it with my children too. Like ninjas make mistakes because like, how do you know what your potential is unless you don't pass it? How do you know what it is unless you fail? And so you have to consistently and like the more that you can fail, the better, honestly. And I think that sometimes with just school, a lot of times it's all about the A and it's all about the perfection. And that's actually it's like where's the opportunity, and the opportunity is always in the mistake. So I've really enjoyed having my athletes come back and work. And you're right, if there's anything that I want people to get out of this podcast and with you is to let those athletes see truly how amazing they are, that just like you talked about BJ, they've built this muscle of productivity over time, like the amount that they can get done in a day for their work, their family, their health, their community is just, they just know how to operate at a higher level. And I think now with entrepreneurship being, well, I guess it's cool. And I always say like I was an entrepreneur like way before it was cool. Like I didn't even know I was an entrepreneur. I just was, doing what I loved. But it's truly like I want to make sure that the athletes and the just people in the sports world know that it's a possibility and know that it's something that can be done, and it's more about the life skill than it is the business skill. So let's talk a little bit about that. As far as you said you were always an entrepreneur. You after the NFL, and then you started. What skills did you feel like you were lacking or needed to develop? Like where was your opportunity to grow when you really started to kick it in 100% business?
I think like stories. I always like stories to kind of just to tell how I came to my epiphanies. But when I first got finished with football, I had in my mind retired. Right, I played 9 years, made some really good money. I'm 31 years old. What else do I have to do? So my wife at the time was in medical school, and she's working 12-hour days. So my son, who's 3 and a half, he looks at mommy going to work. He looks at daddy coming home from the golf course, probably had a couple too many beers. And then he asked me one day, he said, Dad, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I was like, what? I said, do you see
so
this house? Do you see this trophy, this ring? Like, what are you talking about? Um, but I didn't sleep that night, and it bothered me. And I'm like, my 3.5-year-old thinks I'm a failure, and I had to change it. So at that time, I went back to school and I got an MBA from George Washington University. And I tell people, I feel like everyone has their own toolkit, by their side. And for most people, or for me, the only tool that I was using was a hammer. And unfortunately, when you only use a hammer, every situation looks like a nail, right? So I think going back to school, I really had a chance to recalibrate my calculator, my measuring stick, everything else in my toolkit so I could be able to adjust. But one of the skill sets that I was lacking was just understanding the finances, how I evolved around business, like really understanding the P&L. Right? What does this stuff really mean? How does it affect my business? Like, what's this cash flow? What's this EBITDA number? What does this stand for? What's net income? And I think not really understanding and now understanding, it's like so powerful that you understand the financials behind your business, because people think top line sales and equate that to revenue, but if your controls are off, or if your labor is off, or your purchasing power is off, I mean, it's tough, to make money. So that's why it's so important to understand the finances, how every decision impacts the financial, and in some way or another.
Well, what you just said, the hammer and everything looks like a nail, like I can so relate to that, because especially when you have resilience and work ethic and just you're a go-getter, you're like, I'll figure this out and I'm going to try everything under the sun. And I actually went to a business conference a couple of years ago, and they said operators are tired, owners are rich. And or it was something like that, but it was basically like, if you're not standing back looking at where are you puppeting, like if you just keep pulling one arm, like that other arm's not going to work. And most people, like, you can succeed by just sheer resilience, but can you imagine what it would look like when you take your sheer resilience and put a system around it, like an actual template of, oh, hey, look, now I can see everything? Because that was my biggest weakness too, was finances, and it probably still is. But I surround myself with people that are way smarter than me when it comes to that. But I still have to know it. That's the one thing I've learned, like, especially when you grow and you start outsourcing a lot of those bigger positions in your company. And I don't know if you dealt with that, but people think, oh, well, you just get somebody to do that for you. Like, it doesn't work like that, or at least it hasn't in my case. It's been like, you really kind of at least need to understand what's going on, because you can't lead them and you can't ask the right questions if you don't know the basic knowledge.
Yeah, and it's funny, like, and everyone like, oh wow, like, why did you get your MBA, or and to your point, like, I don't need to be able to do the bank rec, but this person who does, I need them to be able to ask them, pointed questions about what they're doing, why they're doing that, why numbers aren't, correctly, how are we successful here? And I think being able to formulate those questions and have an understanding when they respond is really the job. Because I was taught when I got into business and when I purchased a stack pickle, was to go to work on your business and not in your business. And that allowed me to really, move and follow the trends and make decisions based on where I want the business to go, and not so busy covering a shift because you don't have a cook. Like, our business in 5 years will not be successful if I'm the one at the front door and I'm covering shifts and I'm cooking the food. We just won't. Like, if I wanted one restaurant, that would be the formula. But because our goal is to have 50 stores in 5 years, I have to be out, on the forefront of franchise and figuring out technology, figuring out what trends are next. And I have to have a good understanding so I can point us in the right direction.
One of my questions that I like to ask is the next big dream that you have to work for. And it sounds like that's one of them. Talk about that. What's the next big dream?
Business wise, the next big dream is that's it. 50 stores in 5 years, kind of the goal. We currently have 9 corporate locations. We've signed 2 franchisees. We have about another 3 in the works. So the goal is to, obviously start slow, and then by year 5 have 50 franchisees. So that's kind of our BHAG, and we're excited about achieving that goal.
Is there anyone, any particular company specifically within franchising that you are looking up to, or like their style, modeling yourself after? Any franchise mentor companies?
So there are mentor companies, like, I think Walk Ons, I think, is in Louisiana, and I think even Drew Brees is an investor but they do a very good job just of company culture. They've grown significantly over the last few years. So that's a company that I model. They're in the sports bar realm, but they actually are a different sports bar. Their food is totally different than ours. They have a more of a Cajun flavor. So I mean, obviously they're a competitor, but I think they're doing a really good job. And I love the company culture that they set.
Culture is kind of huge. We've always with Ninja Zone and then the gyms, we have about 150 employees, and most of them being part-time, but that's really been our focus this year. Ninja Zone, took off quickly, and then, the gyms, they were very separate, and I needed to get that culture together because Ninja Zone had new systems and a great startup culture, and then the gyms, it's 40-year-old family business, and it's amazing just being intentional. Like, we took 2018 was being intentional about that culture and about making sure that the experience and the brilliance was getting from one side to getting from the old to the new, and then the trends and innovation was getting from the new to the old. It's been like, it's changed my life as a leader 100%. Like, reduction of stress. I don't feel like I'm trying to do everything for everybody because there's so much communication, and culture in general, I think, is always going to come over policies, like policies, rules. And I see a lot of entrepreneurs trying to like dive into their policies and rules. And those are important. But if you create a culture that that it doesn't even need to be spoken, like, that's when you know that you've really won. And so we've tried to do that, and I've felt that inside of the pickle. Every pickle I've been in, which several, you feel it. So I love that. Well, Gary, thank you so much. I could keep you on here for days, just selfishly, but I will let you go. Let's see. Give me one of your most favorite quotes that you feel like has propelled you forward, and then we'll wrap up. That one light bulb quote. And you've had a few, but maybe I'm going to try to go for one more.
For me, it's about the speed of the leader determines the rate of the pack. And, as CEO, I'm not on the beach. I'm not on vacation. I'm working alongside of my employees. And I tell them that, I still work the most hours in the company. And I think that mentality, when they look at me, and if it's a new store opening and there's furniture that need to get put together, I'm bringing my toolbox and I'm helping. If there's something that needs to get delivered, like, if I'm free, I'm helping out. And I think that mentality that I'm not above any job in our company really, shows our employees that every job is important, and how we do anything is how we should do everything.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you very much. Before we go, could you tell our guests how they find you or your restaurant groups? Just let us know where we can find you.
Restaurantstackedpickle.com. And on there, you can find information about franchising. And then myself, you can find me on Instagram at Gary Brackett, and also at Twitter at Gary Brackett58.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gary. And hopefully just good luck with your 50 and 5 years. And I'd love to have you back.
All right. Sounds great.
Oh, man. So Gary gave us so much to think about today. The one big takeaway I had was, when you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, which I think for all of us has been the story of our lives. And his personal mantra, the speed of the leader determines the rate of the pack. So today's episode was absolutely wonderful, and can't wait to have Gary back on. See you next time, guys. You can catch our show wherever you access podcasts via iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or Google Play. Check the links to products and resources discussed in this week's show at thesportsentrepreneur.com. That's THE sportsentrepreneur.com. And while you're there, send me your guest requests and the questions you want answers to. Thank you, and join me next week for another sports business conversation.